What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 336 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher, getting ready to talk some Nets with the news we just got before we recorded, and then we'll talk some old and some new players with the Lakers. Lots to talk about with the Darvin Ham report that came out. With me to do so, Drew Dinkmeyer. How's it going?
It's going well. I'm fired up after this NBA press release on the Nets. So I came into this podcast anticipating talking about the Thunder, who I've been thinking about now for the last week since their dismantling of the Nuggets in Denver. And then also on Tuesday, their big win at home against Boston. I've been wanting to talk Thunder and itching to talk them. And then the Lakers have been unraveling a little bit. So that's been exciting. But man, this press release from the NBA in terms of what they're finding the Nets for has me really concerned for what we try to do in the future in terms of predicting rotations and projections. Because, man, this language, I'll read this. The Brooklyn Nets are fined $100,000. The NBA announced today that the Brooklyn Nets organization has been fined $100,000 for violating the league's player participation policy in connection with the team's game against the Milwaukee Bucks on December 27th at Barclays Center. Following an investigation, including review by an independent physician, the NBA determined that 4 Nets rotation players who did not participate in the game could have played under the medical standard in the player participation policy, which was adopted prior to this season. The organization's conduct violated the policy, which is intended to promote player participation in the NBA's 82-game season. Mike, they're not finding them for what they did with Bridges. They're finding them for what they did with Cam Johnson, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, with the rest. And if they're finding them with the rest, if the rest is the issue that they're identifying here, the Nets' solution with Mikal Bridges was apparently fine. Which, look, we reviewed this on the podcast a few episodes ago in terms of why it was beneficial to bettors who were able to identify the situation and take advantage of it. But in the future, maybe with the Nets, maybe they'll just treat everything like the Mikal Bridges situation. We don't know how they're going to respond to this directly. But this encourages other teams to do what they did with Mikal Bridges. And the only reason we knew they were doing it with Mikal Bridges is because we saw them do it before. So we're going to get caught off guard, potentially, by teams doing this with some players if this is the thing that they want to promote. They want to promote it's okay to have players play 12 minutes in a game. It's not okay to have mass rest situations. And this was my concern when they released the new policy and the new rules around 65 games this year, that we would have a number of games during the course of the season. And it's still my concern for later in the season that we'll have a number of games where star players are only playing 20 minutes and we have no idea that they're only going to play 20 minutes because they're just trying to get to the game threshold minimum. And this makes me even more concerned that that's going to be the approach that the league is sort of promoting going forward, which is covering their butts on, hey, fans, you wanted to see your star player tonight? Yeah, you got to see him. You're not upset. You got to see him. When fans are like, yo, Silver, I wasn't paying for 18 minutes of LeBron. That's not what I paid my ticket for. Like, great, I got to see a little taste of LeBron, but can I get half price on this ticket because I got half the minutes I was expecting? And so I just think this is a miss by the league. I think it's going to cause more issues than they're anticipating, and I'm surprised that this is the tact that they're taking.
So let's talk through just what the exact reporting on that day. And I mentioned, we were all over this, so Nick Claxton, there's only one player who's listed for rest, and that's Spencer Dinwiddie. His tag is out rest. Nick Claxton, injury, illness, left ankle sprain, injury maintenance. He hasn't been on the injury report for that in quite some time. Dorian Finney-Smith being one of the players is a little odd because there was an instance, call it 4 or 5 games ago, he popped up for this knee thing. So for him to be included in the 4 players is a little bit odd to me. Cam Johnson, knee sprain, he hasn't been listed with the knee thing for a bit. He had the hamstring, the calf. So that was odd. He wasn't listed since he's been healthy. There's precedence to this for sure that, again, and it should note, none of these players were listed the day before, which I think is the biggest piece of criteria for them to institute this fine. But Spencer Dinwiddie, and then to your point, just it's the mass rest they don't want. They want you to rest players here and there. They sat out basically their whole team. They were playing their G League guys, got their whole team in there. So yeah, I'm curious to see if there's more scheduled rest, like how they're going to disperse it. But this is interesting. And I mean, as much as it seems like a big deal, it's $100,000. Like, who cares to them? Like it's what with the Panthers owner getting fined. It's not like going to really bother him. Do you think that the size of the fine is actually like making people, like from an NBA team standpoint? Do you think that that's affecting their decision making?
I don't think $100,000 is going to affect the decision making.
Mm-hmm.
I think much more likely to affect the decision making is the fan reaction to the decision on how they approach things. I think that's much more likely to impact the decision making from a front office or a training staff than $100,000 fine. That's peanuts compared to what they make on ticket sales and merchandise and all that stuff in terms of brand recognition and brand sentiment within your fan base. So I don't think it'll make any sort of difference there. I'm frustrated that I think the league's solution to all of this stuff is obfuscation. That's what they're trying to essentially promote. They're trying to promote, like, make it as confusing as possible for your fans to know if they're going to play, because we want you to kind of lie to them. We want you to kind of like put a guy on the injury report 3 days in a row, questionable beforehand, and then he sits out the game and we can be like, oh yeah, see, you had an injury there. This is why he's out. It's not really a rest thing, because we want to change the narrative around this stuff. We want to change the narrative around players sitting out and resting. We want it to be attributed to injury maintenance, that the reason that they're being sat out. And it's just such a frustrating, as a diehard fan, as a person who lives and breathes the NBA, it's such a frustrating way to try to solve the problem, because for us who are in it each and every day, this just means more questionable tags that we're going to have to assess whether they're legitimate or not. It means more lack of clarity around who's playing on a given night, because they're encouraging teams to make this as confusing as possible. So it's a shell game of, you don't know where the questionable tag is going to actually be an out tag. And then when it is, well, you can't blame that it's rest, because it's really an injury. But for the fans who are in it all the time, they're not the one, like, the majority of people who complain about the rest situation, I think, are those who are not diehard fans of the NBA. And so it feels like you're catering to the masses at the expense of your most loyal fans, and making the injury reporting around the game more confusing.
So I did some research, and it's funny because they hire these team of medical people to do research, and I did it in like 30 seconds. So I was looking through like the injury history for all these guys. Nick Claxton wasn't listed for an ankle and he did miss a game for this. So they're like, oh, he missed a game for this. Let's list him. Dorian Finney-Smith, he was listed, which I just I mentioned on December 18th for knee soreness. Hey, let's list him with that and sit him. Spencer getting rest, that's straightforward. And then Cameron Johnson, first time he's been listed with a knee all year. I mentioned those 2 injuries. So yeah, it's for sure pretty shady. But yeah, definitely curious to follow. I don't really have too much. I think I don't know. I'm not really reacting to it too hard, but definitely something to watch for sure. I think you touched on most of them. Any sort of closing thoughts here?
I just think the next iteration of this is we're going to get more shady, questionable tags that we're not going to know on a given day. For people who are buying tickets day of to see players or to see games, they're going to have more days where there's a questionable player on the injury report that they're going to be like, well, I don't know if I want to buy this same day game ticket today to go and see this player. And I think for us in the fantasy sports betting space, it's just going to lead to more challenging situations. And the most challenging situation, the one that I think is just really bad for everybody involved, and I think it's worse than what happened. Well, I shouldn't say it's worse than what happened with the Nets. It's what happened with the Nets. I think the worst thing that you can have is for the game is for people to think that they're going to see a full game of a player and not, because you're getting rug pulled. And I think that's the worst experience for a fan. That's a worse experience than the player being ruled out beforehand, in my opinion. It's similar. It's not too dissimilar, but I think it's worse. And I think that's what the league is sort of promoting in these situations. And that is my big concern, is that we're going to get to the point, especially late in the season, with this stupid 65 games minimum requirement, that you're going to have the last 2 weeks of the season, you're going to have guys playing 20 minutes a night just to hit the games requirement so they can get voted to the first team. And I don't know I'm hopeful that we won't get this and this won't be the issue, but I'm fearful that this will be the issue and it will lead to an even more watered down product that people are more frustrated with than the addition that people are frustrated with players resting.
So I'm gonna spin it to something that's actually I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the Bucks injury report. So we're recording this before the Bucks injury report has come out, and so let's just think through how this would look. Given what we just learned and talked about. Obviously, the three players to say are Chris Middleton. I don't even need to say anything. Anyone who's watched Chris Middleton's minutes all year knows they've been managing him. There's certainly precedence to sit him in rest. Damian Lillard, he had at previous years, he's had off-season abdominal surgery. He's missed time for abdominal surgery. Abdominal surgeries are something that pop up and are wear and tear injuries. Can you sit him in a back-to-back when you're already sitting Chris Middleton? Giannis Antetokounmpo, calf injury multiple times. We saw him get tagged last time with a questionable tag. Was that he played through it and was not limited at all? Foot injury not limited at all. Was that something that these team doctors that are independent doctors that are looking at this report, is that enough? So because again, this is like quite clear, because again, we're talking about an ankle injury from Nick Claxton. That's pretty clear. That doesn't really linger, since he hadn't dealt with it in like a month. And then I mentioned Cam Johnson wasn't listed all year. I mean, Spencer getting listed with rest, that was just stupid. And then I was surprised, like I said, Dorian Finney-Smith, there's precedence to that. Knee soreness is a thing that does take time. So I don't know. Do you have any? That's all I just kind of wanted to add, because hey, tune into the injury show. I'm pretty obsessed with it. So I'm curious to see, just because if different styles of injuries are looked at differently. Do you think they would? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Who knows? But I guess what I'd say is I'm watching to see if teams are coaxed into on what they think is like a normal rest day, or to just I'm envisioning a nationally televised game tonight that somebody sits in to watch Giannis versus Wemby, and they're really excited about seeing two of the best players in the league. And I'm imagining the TNT broadcast midway through the third quarter having to explain why Giannis has mysteriously not checked back into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of messaging that would be for fans who are sitting there watching the game and saying, what do you mean? What do you mean Giannis is only playing 20 minutes tonight? What am I even doing in turning off the game? That's what I'm envisioning as the next stage of this, because we watch the Nets broadcast from a pregame perspective, and this is a local broadcast. So this is, they are tied into the team. This isn't a national broadcast that's just coming in and popping in. The local broadcast was prepping you the whole way through. We don't know how much he's going to play tonight. We'll see how many minutes they're able to play tonight. They're prepping you the whole way through. They're holding your hand like, hey, get ready. You're about to be rug pulled. I think that's a terrible experience for the fans. So, I just don't think this is the solution. I think this is a faulty ideal of a solution if they think, and I think it's so crazy that the situation that they chose to find was the one in which the Nets did with Mikal Bridges what my biggest fear is, that the league could potentially become something that happens more frequently. And they chose not to address that in any of the language around the fine, but just address the mass resting, which there have been other situations where there have been mass rest for teams this year. Perhaps not the extent of 4 rotation players, but certainly 3. We've seen 3 happen before, and it wasn't commented on or fined. And so I'm really surprised that the language around this is not addressing the limited playing time, which I don't know how they could address, but this is the whole system that they're setting up is for more of these situations to happen.
I'll add one more thing. And you talked about the pregame broadcast. They were talking about, oh, this is a big game for Cam Thomas. They didn't know, this is the studio analyst. I think that because again, I mean, I cover everything the best I can, but I could tell this was possible. We were all over it. And, it was even the Cam Thomas, even though I don't think that even the people with covering the team knew it, for sure. It was I'll just say it was Frank Isola who does the studio stuff, but he's so busy. He's does ESPN job, and all that. So he wasn't. I don't think he knew. He wouldn't have even said that if he knew that. But yeah. So all right, I think that's going to cover it. If you have anything else to add, let's move on.
No.
Let's talk about the other big story today. That is what's going on with the Los Angeles Lakers. A really big story from The Athletic, citing 6 sources And the number 6 was in the report, which was just stunning to even get that. Like, why even say that? But yeah, just about the disconnect, and certainly the Darvin Ham rotations are all over the place. This team has not had any sort of consistent health. A lot of players being in and out of the lineup, all this and that. It goes on and on and on from Shams Charania and Hoban Buha. Both do great jobs, obviously. But and then I'll add one more thing before I hand it to you. So I go through Darvin Ham's pressers every time, and I just do it through YouTube, whatever. And half the content I see is Fire Ham. So clearly, this is something that the fan base wants. What were your first thoughts when you saw the report on Darvin Ham and the disconnect between him and the locker room?
I had a number of thoughts kind of hit all at once when you were talking through that there. The first thought that hit me was it's not uncommon in the middle of the season for a LeBron James team to have this sort of focus placed on either the coaching staff or the front office in terms of sort of dysfunction or putting pressure on them to really, move the needle on trying to improve the team. I think throughout LeBron James' history, with the exception of maybe the Miami Heat, which is like a more tight-lipped kind of culture and organization, I think you've seen at different stops mid-season, if the team is not cruising near the top of their respective conference, you've seen pressure be put on publicly by either either on the front office or on the coaching staff. I think anytime there are also large markets and fan bases, and the Lakers have one of the biggest fan bases in the world in terms of the NBA because of all their success, because of the size of their market, because of the star power that they've had in the league, you are going to hear more. You're going to hear more louder voices on things because there's more of the voices. So you're going to get more of an echo chamber on a thought process on how to fix things, right? So a lot of that pressure will then also become louder and more concentrated on one individual. Last year, it was the front office, was a lot of the pressure that was put on around this team that they really needed to go out and make a trade. Coming into the season, we had spent a lot of time and content on what the Lakers could do to improve their roster. That pressure was sort of taken off by some of the roster adjustments that they were able to make. And so now the pressure is shifting back towards Darvin Ham. And I think a lot of the criticisms are warranted, but I also think that it's also a situation where some of the best pieces that I thought they would have to add to this team this year, like Gabe Vincent, I thought was a really important piece for them. They haven't had him all year, and that has made the rotations a little bit funkier in terms of what they've been able to do. And then Darvin is saying, like, well, we need to be healthy to get a good look at things and, feel better about things. And ultimately, you look at kind of what the schedule has been of late, and it's not super surprising. I mean, this loss at home to Miami was bad. But before that, it was at New Orleans on the second night of a back-to-back, after at Minnesota, which is one of the best defensive teams in the league, that they played really well, had a bad call go against them in a really tight game. Before that, they had a home win against Charlotte. Before that, it was a home loss to Boston on Christmas Day. Boston's one of the best teams in the NBA. Before that, it was a win at Oklahoma City, which we'll talk about Oklahoma City in a second. And before that, the schedule was at Minnesota. The schedule's been brutal. So like the struggles of late post in-season tournament, which I think they also had to play an extra game than everybody else, right? Which is also not great for an older vet team. The schedule's also been intense and brutal and involved. I think there's been 3 back-to-backs since the in-season tournament for them. That's a lot to put on these guys. And Anthony Davis is playing at MVP level and playing incredible, and LeBron's playing incredible as well. But they're not getting enough help from the secondary pieces. And I think the last year that focus was on the front office in terms of executing and getting them more talent to get the most out. And now it's shifted to Darvin Ham in terms of his ability to get the most out of those secondary pieces. And they're clearly struggling, but the pieces also don't fit super cleanly as well, because like the wing pieces that they have that they need out there for defense bring nothing else to the table. And so as soon as Taurean Prince and Cam Reddish's play fell off, they fell off as a team because they don't have Gabe Vincent to kind of lock in there with Austin Reeves and be like a combination that you can rely on for shooting and ball handling, along with a little bit of defense. But they'd still be short perimeter defenders. So I think it's a little bit warranted in Ham and the pressure's raising, but I think this powder keg always happens around LeBron in the Lakers, and because he's such a big draw and he has so many fans and like there's so many expectations.
So I think two things jump out to me, and one is the timing against the opponent. Who's a better coach who's more revered as a coach than Eric Spoelstra? Anybody?
Great point. No.
Nobody. Not only that, they did not have Jimmy Butler. They started Jovic. They started Nikola Jovic out of nowhere. I didn't see this coming at all. They played in big minutes, and they out-coached the hell out of them. The Miami Heat played the most zone defense they've played all year, and after they played the second most all year. And so last night, they had a 0.79 points per possession against all those zone coverages. Now, if you couple that to the Clippers, who just played this zone defense last year, 1.4. They almost doubled them against a zone defense. That just like, they knew it, and this is, you're using zone against LeBron James. This is like, don't do that. Like, people don't do that. And it worked great. So I think that's like a huge thing for me. I'll hand it to you back there, and then I got some other thoughts that I wanted to add. But what do you think about like the Spoelstra time? Do you think, because if you have 6 sources, this is like this was not being worked on overnight, and you could tell there's research the whole way through. This was coming here. So I think there was like, okay, hey, we got these sources out here. They lose to this game. It's go time. That's kind of how I feel this work. This is how it usually is with stories like this, but it's quite clear that this is set up. How do you feel about my thoughts there?
Great points. Great points first on Spo and the embarrassment of losing that game to a shorthanded Miami Heat roster in the way that they lost it as well. They shot 4 for 30 from 3 in that game. And if you look at where the bulk of the 3-point attempts were, Taurean Prince 0 for 5, LeBron 0 for 6, Max Christie 2 for 9, Christian Wood 0 for 2. It's generally a lot of guys that aren't great shooters. Now, LeBron's had a really good shooting year, so it's not fair to put him in that group, but it was generally able to funnel a lot of 3-point shot opportunities to guys who their only purpose out there is to make those shots, and they didn't make those shots. And if they don't make those shots, there's not a lot of value in having them out there, but there's not a lot of alternatives without Rui Hachimura, without D'Angelo Russell, without Gabe Vincent that they could have gone to. Like, what is Darvin Ham supposed to do in that situation if Max Christie and LeBron and Taurean Prince aren't making open threes? It's not like, oh, let's play more Jared Vanderbilt. That's going to solve this. Like there just weren't really Jalen Hood-Schifino. It's there, Jackson Hayes. There's not really options for them to play to beat that. So I also agree that this story has been building. I think it's interesting if you look at kind of their schedule when this story would have started building, because really up through the in-season tournament, things were going pretty well for the Lakers. You would feel pretty confident about how things were looking for the Lakers. And so when did things really turn? Probably the home loss to New York and then the loss at Chicago probably got the wheels turning on this stuff. And then the schedule ahead, it was like, if you're a reporter and you're looking at the schedule ahead, you're like, I got an opportunity here where things are probably going to be a little bit rockier that I could capitalize on this. And we know in a media that big, in a media market that big, with a team that draws that much attention, reporting like this is going to get a lot of clicks, right? Like people want to divert their anger and their frustration to a source that resonates with them. And the firing of Darvin Ham or the pressure around Darvin Ham certainly resonates with Lakers fans right now. So yeah, I think your comments are spot on.
And a couple more things to add. So just from like a schemes, I talked a lot about this on the content, whether it's DFS show, injury show. Like, I don't understand why they're taking 80 out of the drop. They've been playing so much heavier switch. That has to be something else. Like, we were so good and we've been so good with 80 as a drop big and to protect the paint. Why are we not doing that anymore? And that's not why they lost, but it's just odd coaching. And it's just like they're getting too cute. Like, you're starting all these non-shooters with, again, everyone who's listening to this podcast, I pretty much can guarantee knows that, the 101 of offense with LeBron is putting shooters around him. And you're going to put Jared Vanderbilt and all these other non-shooters around him and like roll with it for a long period of time. It's just from even like a somewhat casual to a intense fan, even to like our level or higher. It's just odd. So that was one thing. And then one last thing I wanted to add was like the Austin Reeves print all over this article. His name's in there 12 times. It's quite clear that like this, and this is what I was so on last week when we were talking about six man of the year being such an open market, because I thought this Reeves stuff wasn't going to stick. So like he's like clearly their third best player, and like how you if we just talked about their lack of depth on the roster, like teams. I mean, look at like I guess the Knicks sometimes, but that we see teams who have like 3 or 4 really, really high end guys. They will play them 35, 40, 50, like the Raptors are a good example. Even the Wolves are somewhat like these guys who have like these really star players. Like Reeves is a pretty good player. He's coming off the bench, so naturally you can't play him, 36, 37 minutes here when they need him. And instead you'd rather just like plug holes with these cute lineups. And like you're a coach. You can't, like, you're supposed to help your team, but like you're almost trying to help them too much. And I think that was kind of a reason that, again, I think this is like so clear that this is kind of building. But the Reeves stuff just didn't make any sense to me, which is why I was able to bet into it there. But any thoughts there on just overall allocation? The Reeves thing, do you think that was a part of this too? Because it's quite clear that like I think Austin Reeves is like, the benching from him made no sense. That's the article kind of really drives that point home. Right.
Yeah, the timing is a little suspect given they start Reeves and they have probably 100%. The most embarrassing loss of the options that they've had. But yeah, I think it was always going to be a delicate situation figuring out how to deal with D'Angelo Russell in LA this year after the playoffs last year when he was de-emphasized heavily. And so I understand, especially when Reeves struggled out of the gates this year to start, why they went in the direction that they went in. But certainly it's very evident and has been since coming into the season that Reeves is their third best player and they need to play him more and they need to find ways to do that. The challenge is to find ways to do that. You need to de-emphasize D'Angelo Russell quite a bit. And if that's the case, you might have lack of buy-in from a player that you also need to be. This is kind of what we saw with Russell Westbrook when he was with the Lakers, right? Where like he didn't fit as well in that first unit and they really needed him to buy into leading the second unit in a big way to unlock their best version of themselves. And then they ended up trading Russ, after they got a better version of themselves for a period of time. And I think they probably need the same thing from D'Angelo Russell. But it would help a lot if they had Gabe Vincent shooting 40% out there from 3. Like that would be a big help to this team just structurally quite a bit. So I think we see Reeves start more going forward. I agree with you that the biggest criticism of Darvin Ham is they went from a situation where the offense was working great and the defense wasn't up to championship standard. And he tried to fix the defense and hope to keep the offense. And he ended up screwing up both things. And that deserves a lot of criticism. It was also a solution that he went to in the playoffs last year, and it worked for a very limited period of time with Jared Vanderbilt on a very specific player in Ja Morant. And after that, it didn't really work. And so it is suspect that was the methodology that he chose to investigate once again. And I think these are all legitimate criticisms. I also think filling that coaching void mid-season, if they choose to go that route, is very difficult to do. Like very, very difficult to do. You need a pretty well-respected name around the league to come in. And how many well-respected names around the league are just sitting there, waiting for a job, right? Like, cause you can't poach someone mid-season from someone else. That's not going to happen. So
I mean, Doc Rivers' name is going to come up. He was on the broadcast.
I guess that's the name, right? I guess, that'll come with its own question marks come April and May. But yeah, I think the criticism is deserving for Darvin Ham. I think it's louder than it is for other coaches because of the stakes and because of the market. I don't think there's a particularly great alternative that fixes everything.
I only have one name that popped in my head. Do you want to take it? It's someone I've been touting for years. someone who had recently got a little parting of ways there. Terry Stotts. I think he'd be a great coach. That'd be my pick.
That is a good one.
Got experience.
That is a good one.
High caliber high end playoff games.
Yeah.
He's kind of a no nonsense coach. He's probably the best candidate to me. An offense first coach. That's kind of what you want here. That would be my if that market came out, I'd bet on.
I like that name. I like that name. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's even close.
Yeah, but
I haven't really thought it through. But I was like, oh.
I like that name. I think going forward, our expectation would be that they try to fix this by starting Austin Reeves. They try to get more punch in the second unit from D'Angelo Russell and Rui Hachimura. I think they need to go to playing Jared Vanderbilt at the center in the second unit, probably. And then I think ultimately what they really need to do is they really need to flip D'Angelo Russell for a wing, but I don't know how they're going to be able to do that. Like wings are just really hard to acquire out there. So, but that's the roster thing that they need to do. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. I don't think Mike D'Antoni wants to come back, but at least Terry Stotts was like, he wanted to coach this year, Yeah. So I think that's if I'm the Lakers and I need to get out of this thing, I think it's not even close. Like who else even comes up? D'Antoni comes up. Mentioned Doc Rivers. He comes up. I think that's kind of it. So I don't have too much else to add there, but this is good to talk through. Anything else? Mark Jackson. That's another one that always comes up.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking. Yeah, Kenny Atkinson's another one that makes some sense.
I don't know. I don't know if he'd have enough.
Yeah,
I don't know if he'd have enough buy-in, but
yeah. Cool. All right, let's get to the OKC Thunder. Yeah, really tough schedule loss for them. Coming in at 4 a.m. against Atlanta. We saw they had no legs early and still were able to pull off a really nice comeback to get that to within a possession. Isaiah Joe corner 3 away on a brilliant play to get there. Certainly SGA making a charge here. Chet Holmgren, Rookie of the Year, running away. Diagonal running away almost with Coach of the Year situation. Yeah, where do you want to start? I'll just hand it to you with a blank slate this time.
I think where I want to start is when we talked about the Western Conference contenders just a week or so ago, I highlighted with Oklahoma City that the one piece that's missing is seeing them do stuff in the playoffs. And just historically in the NBA, you need to see teams kind of go through it together in the playoffs when the intensity is heightened to sort of climb the mountaintop. Like that's historically the way we've seen it in the NBA. And they keep doing things in the regular season that are making me think like, man, maybe they can scale it the first time. Like maybe they really can, because they play with such a seriousness and such an intensity and such a commitment to playing the right way that each and every night when I watch them, I'm like, man, I think maybe they could be an outlier in this situation and maybe kind of make a really deep run really quickly. And this stretch that they've been through from December 16th to January 2nd, they played at Denver, Memphis at home, Clippers at home, Lakers at home, Minnesota at home, Knicks at home, at Denver, Brooklyn at home, Boston at home. 2 of those like 10-ish games are softer, right? Brooklyn at home, Memphis at home. The rest are teams that I think most of us would consider the very top echelon. Denver twice, Minnesota, the Lakers, the Knicks, and Boston. Like that's, near the top echelon of the league. And first and second tier teams is how we thought of them. The Lakers was the one loss that they had in there. That's an incredibly impressive stretch. In most of those games, they won in control. I mean, they beat Minnesota by 23. They beat Denver in Denver by 26. Just super impressive wins for this team. They beat Minnesota at home and then the Knicks on the second night of a back-to-back at home. And so I still think like, okay, we could add maybe another vet big for some depth there. We could maybe add a vet ball handler, maybe. But like this team is really, really loaded. And I'm starting to think like maybe I would pick them over a lot of these other teams in a playoff series, even though I haven't seen it yet. And so I just kind of wanted to talk through the Thunder because they've been so impressive to me this year. And we were optimistic on them coming into the year, and I think they've even exceeded our expectations because Chet's been even better. Shea has shown no regression from last year's breakout season, and J-Dub continues to get better as well. And like they've got all the pieces in the world to reshape the roster however they want, which I think is just a really interesting discussion as well. But I mean, are you adjusting with who you'd take them above in a playoff series at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it. And just one thing I just want to lead with is they just have such better like odds because so transition scoring, easiest way to score, right? They're first in transition scoring per game. They are second in transition scoring against. So they are killing teams running down the court, and they are keeping them from that happening to them on the other end. Think about how much effort and will and coaching and motivation that takes. You can't just show up and do that every night, you know? That's just a credit to the players, a credit to the coaches. Now, as the playoffs come around, certainly those factors I talked about, a little easier to get there with the motivation and that will and yada, yada, yada. So there's that makes it, tougher sell. But on the same side, we talked a lot about this for Dallas. It was like, oh, half-court offense rises to the top. Hey, guess who's number one in half-court offense right now? The Thunder are. So they've got kind of like both ways. I think they're going to make a run at number one, though, like legit. As good as Denver is, this team's such a great regular season team that I think they're legit. But yeah, they're going to have home court in the first round, and I don't know who I would pick against them. Playing if we wanted to play the who would you pick against game. I mean, it's maybe two teams.
The teams that I had listed before were Denver and Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure anymore.
I think Denver's. I still had to pick Denver after what they did last year, I think. And then Minnesota is tough because they have the capabilities to slow down the half-court offense. And should note their half-court defense has been really good. Transition defense. They're, I think, top 4 or 5 after getting wrecked their first 6 games. So basically, since they got wrecked early, they're like 1 or 2. But I think it's just, I honestly think like you can only, and you don't even feel comfortable. But like you like if we were like, say you fast forward to us doing our playoff pod, whoever OKC picks, we're gonna pick them in 5 to 7. OKC winning in 5, or that team or them losing in 7.
Yeah.
I think, like, no doubt.
Yeah.
And even second round, I would say the same thing. Like even against Denver, I would probably say 7. Like this team just doesn't get beat like that. And we saw again, we've seen this time in, time out that they either pull away when they need to, and they have just enough. That's what happened in Boston. And then last night they almost pulled this crazy comeback off on a back to back, mind you. Do you know how many times I want to bet against teams who are like back to back in the situation? And I couldn't do it because this team is that well coached, that disciplined. I'm not a big like disciplined effort guy, but like it's so clear to me that this team just has it more than any other team in the league.
There were like 5 different times in that game against Atlanta they could have mailed that game in easily, and nobody would have batted an eye at you guys had flight delays. You got in at 4:45 in the morning. You're playing a team that's playing at a breakneck speed in terms of trying to wear you down. Wouldn't have batted an eye if they just were like, not our night. Let's get out and enjoy the Atlanta nightlife a little bit. No, they just kept coming. They've shown so much resolve throughout the course of the season, and they haven't won a playoff series, so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But if you look at the future of this league, it is hard to see how you build a team 3 years from now. If we fast forward to 3 years from now, it is hard to see how you build a team that will compete with this team. They are so good, so young, and they have so many picks. They can build this however they want to build this. They've got the absolute killer in the half court with Shea. I don't think anybody can guard Shea in the league right now. And Chet has been incredibly impressive, not only with his shooting, but with his dribble drive game this year, and his ability to pump fake and go and get to the hoop and use his athleticism. And he's only going to get stronger. It's it's hard to envision. I mean, Spurs will have their say with building around Wemby, and we'll see what the Spurs can do to build around Wemby. But this trio of Shea and J-Dub, by the way, man,
Yep.
we
That's
talk
what I was
about how
gonna go.
like Tatum and Brown, how you have like two guys that can break down a defense in isolation and get you buckets when you need them. J-Dub has added all of that to his game this year, where he can take possessions and break down the defense in isolation and just get to the mid-range and knock it down. Last year, he was a little bit of like at the rim or shooting threes, the normal like analytical kind of darling 3-and-D wing. This year, he's added a lot of that isolation to his game as well in the mid-range. And that's you need those buckets in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
You need those. It's harder to get the stuff at the rim in the playoffs. You need to be able to get stuff in the mid-range, and they can do it. And so, like, I'm just so impressed with OKC.
They got hands down. It's not even a conversation. Top 2 of the 3 picks in the draft. Paolo certainly deserves that. He's been playing freaking awesome, but it's not even like I love Jabari's my guy, but not even close. Jaden not even close. Keegan closer, but not even close. Mather not even close. Shaden Sharp not close. Going all the way down. It's not even close. To be able to do that when you already have, well, what's a better trade than SGA? Like they have like one of the best trades to trade for a superstar. How like the big superstar trade buzz is like, oh, it's going bad. It's kind of turning now for Gobert, but yeah, just absolute massive.
They've hit it out of the park. Yeah. They've hit it out of the park, and I'm a big fan of Case and Wallace, who they've got coming along.
Yep.
Like this team is this I have not felt like this excited about watching a young team and thinking about like, so I guess I have fallen in love with Denver over the last few years, but when I was falling in love with Denver, the way that I was thinking about Denver was in the context of like, I think this team can climb the mountaintop and get to a championship. And then as Jokic like transformed himself into what he is now, it was like, okay, maybe they can be like a little bit of a mini dynasty, but the league dynamics are working kind of against it from a payment from being able to pay everybody and keep everybody. And also Jamal and Michael Porter Jr.'s health are difficult to rely on. Mm-hmm. OKC reminds me of like the early Steph, Clay, Dre stuff where it's just like, man, this looks like it's going to be really, really tough to take down. Or the previous iteration, which was the Harden, Durant, Russ stuff, which just didn't fit as well. This all fits so clean. Shea, J-Dub, Chet fits so clean. So I'm very excited. If I asked you to put an over-under in the next 8 years, over-under 1.5 titles for OKC, would you take over or under? It's hard to win a title.
Yeah, it's so hard to win a title. I think that's a good number. I don't know. Probably. I don't know. I'd probably just say under, but
it's so hard to win a title.
Yeah, it's so hard. But they got the goods, and a lot of the high end talent kind of getting a little bit older.
I'd say over, and there's not another team in the league that I'd say over on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure people do like the roster rankings, like they're number one.
Yeah.
When you count the assets and all that stuff too. So
clearly.
Yeah, man. That's my baby team right there. Seeing them grow through the tough times of all the tanking and all these random dudes.
All grown up.
Yeah, they're all grown up. Love to see it.
Mikey's all grown up.
Yeah, man, I'm feeling pretty good. Anything else you wanted to add here? We could talk Pelicans, but I think covering the Mikal stuff, we're ready to get out of here.
We'll save Pelicans for another time because they have been coming on strong. And by the time we record next with the Pelicans, you never know, they could be fading back again. It's just the way the Pelicans go. But before we get out of here, want to shout out all of our viewers on YouTube. Make sure to smash the like button, help circulate our content within the algorithm here. We're putting up more of these podcast episodes on YouTube to try to continue to grow our audience here as well. If you are listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, you can check us out on YouTube, Established Run NBA YouTube channel, and check out our injury analysis shows Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern as well. You can check out past shows where Mike gives out all the goods on how to break down the slate from an injury perspective. But yeah, shout out to all the people watching us on YouTube and all those listening out there on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, so on and so forth. We'd appreciate you venturing over to the YouTube streets and checking us out there as well.
Yep, should be fun talking about injuries if we are going to be worried about how coaches are going to play this from a new scheme standpoint, because, I'm listening to all the coaches. So got you guys there. Appreciate everyone for listening. Catch you guys next time.